Are you one of those people that's in back-to-back video meetings all day long, where you're meeting with coworkers or students or clients, and you never really get a break? Do you get that sensation at the end of the day where your head is just throbbing and you've got this massive headache from staring at a screen and listening to people talk and the static and the echoing? If so, you're not alone. So many people have been experiencing screen-related exhaustion because of all of the virtual meetings that we found ourselves in ever since the pandemic began. Over the past couple of months, there have been some really interesting studies that have come out that highlight the mechanisms behind Zoom Gloom, or whatever you want to call it. And so I want to share that with you today, as well as, more importantly, what you can do about it. So we're going to talk about some of the research and then some tips that you can use to cope successfully. Let's dive in. The signs of screen exhaustion are fairly easy to notice, at least in the short term. You may have things like feeling tired or having head fog, some confusion or difficulty concentrating. You may have headaches or bodily pains of other sorts or dry eyes. But it's ultimately the long-term consequences that really wage warfare on people's mental health. Things like anxiety and depression start to crop up if you're experiencing these things day after day after day. So the short answer to what causes it is video calls or just being on the screen all day. But there was some research done by researchers at Stanford University that looked at the different components of what it is about the video call that makes it hard. And there are four main ones that they identified. So the first one is you're constantly making eye contact with another person, which is a little bit stressful. There's a level of performance and needing to tune into the other person that happens there. And number two, along those same lines, you're making eye contact with yourself. You can see yourself on screen. So you're aware of yourself, you're paying more attention to how you look, the different expressions that you're making, and that can be really stressful. And then there's component number three. Because doing a video call typically requires sitting at one's desk and staring at a screen, we've been doing a lot of sitting around, and people have become much more sedentary than they used to be. So instead of going out and spending time walking around the office or interacting with colleagues or just getting out and being in nature, we've been doing all of this desk sitting behavior, which is not only increasing the risk of physical health issues like weight gain and blood pressure issues, but it's also increasing the risk of mental health issues where people are being less active, which puts them at a higher risk of things like anxiety and depression. And then we have number four, which is basically that doing a video call takes more cognitive demand simply because of the different components that are required. You gotta set up your computer just right. You gotta position your face in the screen so that you look pretty. All of these things contribute to an increased mental load for the meeting itself. So as you can probably tell, these four things would really affect a person. And Microsoft was curious about this, so they decided to do some research to figure out why it affects people. And their Human Factors Lab put together a study where they had 14 participants put on EEG caps so they could measure their brainwave activity and see what happens when they go to back-to-back meetings all day long. And this is what they found. So if you don't know what an EEG is, that's okay. All it really does is monitor the electrical activity that are going on in different zones in the brain. EEGs are not super accurate in terms of specific brain areas, and everybody's brain is just a little bit different. So don't worry about the different areas that we're seeing here. But if you look at the top row, you can see that as the participants went from meeting to meeting to meeting, their brain became more and more stressed over time, with a peak right at meeting 3, as you can see. I think at meeting 4, maybe people just gave up. It's hard to say. So that was the first condition for this experiment. And then they had a second condition where they had people take breaks in between the meetings to see what would happen in the brain then. And what they found was the people who took the break actually had an opportunity to reset, and their brain didn't build up as much stress as it did in the no break condition. So really interesting stuff. And while it is interesting, most of you are probably wondering what you can actually do about this. And there are 3 specific tips that you can follow. The first tip is get outside as much as possible. It's important to be doing at least 15 minutes every single day where you're getting your heart rate up and you're being physically active, but if you can get out into nature, that's a big bonus. Second, whenever you can, try to schedule your virtual meetings to be audio only. So maybe this means doing a phone call, maybe this means everybody's turning off their Zoom cameras, and that'll help ameliorate some of the stress effects that happen from being on screen. And third, if you can, try to block off 10 minutes in between every virtual meeting that you have, where you're not looking at your screen and you're not performing and you're able to just decompress and de-stress. The research that I was talking about just a moment ago showed that the brain resets from its stress level when you give it at least 10 minutes. So as much as you can, try to build that into your schedule. If you have questions or you want some more information about how you can overcome Zoom gloom, feel free to leave those in the comments for this video or reach out to us through our website at deepeddyspsychotherapy.com.